Welcome to the first meeting organized by the Visegrad Group Association, during which we will discuss 16 years of V4 in the European Union. The meeting is attended by Mr. Bogdan Góralczyk, Director of the Center for Europe of the University of Warsaw, Mr. Dániel Kuttor, Associate Professor at the University of Miskolc, and Mr. András Inotai, former General Director of the Institute for World Economics, former head of the Strategic Task Force on Integration into the European Union. The meeting is moderated by Radmila Roszkowska from Visegrad Group. So the Visegrad Declaration, drawn up on the 1st of May 1991, initiated the process of creating foundations and new forms of political, economic, and cultural cooperation between Poland, Hungary, and former Czechoslovakia in the changed situation in Central Europe. And the main convergent goals of the cooperation were to be, for example, building parliamentary democracy, modern rule of law, creation of a modern market economy, and full participation in the European political, economic, security, and truthfulness system. And 16 years after signing the Visegrad Declaration, Poland, Slovakia, Czechia, and Hungary joined the European Union. And in 2009, Slovakia was the only one to join the Eurozone. Today, after 60 years of joining the European Union, the systems, mainly political but also economic, have changed in the Visegrad countries. So how does the current noticeable polarization and revival of populist and nationalist trends in Europe affect the internal relations of the Visegrad Group? And is there perhaps a time of strategic rivalry? So maybe please, Professor Bogdan Góralczyk.
Well, we are talking about Visegrad, so we need to talk global issues and global affairs. Just to joke a little bit, because Visegrad has enormous problem to create common identity, which is also a problem of the European Union, definitely. And unfortunately, during the whole process of European integration, we didn't define something which could be called as European identity. Vice versa, starting from the time when we were joining the European Union, where the unfamous Iron Curtain was broken down, almost simultaneously some problems has appeared and division lines appeared, which led to current polarization. What I mean by that? Well, partially as a response to Visegrad Group countries, this famous fifth enlargement of 2004. A year later, we had national referendums in France and Netherlands, when the Dutch people and French people said no for the common constitution. So we lost our blueprint, our strategy, our vision, because we wanted initially to create some kind of a supranational entity, which will be a new kind, different kind of subject on international arena and in international law. So we had already a first problem of leadership, of vision, of strategy, which is unfortunately on the agenda until now. In 2009, another problem has appeared, which is not of our origin, has nothing to do with Visegrad or our joining to the European Union. A great global economic crisis erupted, mainly, firstly, in the United States of America, came later to the European Union, and immediately had a form of, at that time, Grexit, not mix it with Brexit. Greece was not prepared to stay both in the Eurozone, and some people were talking that maybe the membership in the European Union of Greece is problematic. So after the problem of vision and strategy, another dimension has appeared, which is economic and social problem, which led to the new axis, new division line between the north, much richer, and the south. We even created a very nice terminology, because some of the countries of the Mediterranean were nominated as new pigs. Portugal, Italy, Greece, and Spain. So we had new pigs in our animal farm, and the division line is standing, another one. So we have economic and social division, mostly on the north-south axis. Next step, 2014, we remember very well here in Visegrad especially, definitely in Poland, that unexpectedly we had Euromaidan in Kiev, we had troubles in the Ukraine, and suddenly the European elites in Brussels discovered that our borders are on fire. And not only in the Ukraine, but also the same 2014, it was the time of creation of so-called ISIS or ISIL or Daesh, the Islamic State, which created a lot of problems. So we discovered that we have no external security outside in immediate neighborhood of the European Union, which led next year, 2015, and it was especially visible in Hungary, the refugee and migrant crisis, which led towards the internal security crisis, because in some cases it was linked directly to the Muslims, to the terrorist attacks, and so on and so forth. And this is unfortunately not the end of the agenda, because we have already leadership crisis, we have economic and social issues, we have external security crisis, we have internal security crisis, and at that moment, 2016, we have another referendum, this time in United Kingdom, and the British surprising us, and probably themselves voted to go out of the union. So instead of ever closer union, we have a new formula since then, ever looser union, whatever you mean by that. So we have a Brexit, which is, according to Boris Johnson, is done on the last day of January this year, but nobody knows what are the features of this Brexit. Negotiations are still in front of us, and nobody really knows what will happen. And finally, 2017, January, certain Donald Trump is coming to town, not necessarily here in Visegrad, but he is coming to the cradle of liberal democracy, and he is creating something which we use to describe in this part of the world in Visegrad Group as illiberal democracy, and I hope we will discuss that later. So inside of the United States of America, there's place of origin of liberal democracy and checks and balances, which is the cradle and architecture of so-called Copenhagen criteria, which are the fundamentals and priorities of the European Union, are undermined even at its source. So altogether, we have so many problems, and now time to think about, when we are locked down in our houses during COVID, to think what next and what will happen to the European integration and the European Union in immediate and near future. I suppose I created a lot of problems and troubles for all of us. Try to resolve them.
Well, it will be difficult, but we'll try. Okay, so maybe changing trends and competition in Europe have changed, and shape of relations within the Visegrad Group. But however, there is another very important player which to some extent is shaping the economic situation of the Central European countries, and it is Germany. So what does V4's dependence on Germany look like, and what is it about? Mr. Dániel Kuttor.
First of all, let me make a feedback to Professor Góralczyk introduction. First of all, I would like to emphasize this fact that we can discuss and we can just have this frame. We call it Visegrad, which I think it's a really great achievement, and which is something partly thanks to the European Union. So although we can see a lot of challenges, a lot of problems around us in the world, and that's true, we are facing a lot of uncontrolled forces and features which can be really hard to forecast. But all in all, we have this cooperation, and Central European nations and countries like the Poles, the Czechs, Slovaks, Hungarians are free to cooperate. This is a really good basis for further cooperation, and I think this is really a really good economic, emotional, cultural basis for further cooperation. So first of all, I wanted to start with this fact that I'm really grateful for you, especially for the Coetus, and for this cooperation to create this frame for joint thinking, collaboration, and working together. What regards Germany, of course, Germany is not a new player. If we look back retrospective to the history of East Central Europe or Central Europe, Germany is the player, the largest player in Central Europe. Although we have to mention this, that East Central Europe, or the part of this, of the continent of Europe, was always among different poles, like Germany, like later like Russia, and please don't forget the southern pole, which we can call former Turkey or Islam. So East Central Europe existed under the interaction of these poles. Obviously, this time, which is really good, Germany influencing really East Central Europe through politics, through economics, and culturally. I think it's not new for Hungary, because the Hungarian kingdom existed in the Austro-Hungarian of the Habsburg Empire, so under the German influence for centuries. So the phenomenon is not new, and we have tradition. It makes this cooperation really really stable, and it brings stability to this cooperation. Although there are some new sessions, some new features in this cooperation in the 21st century, when Germany took the lead within the European Union. Germany is the largest and the most influential economy and political player in the European Union, in the integration. So in another hand, it's a question, if we want to have another frame of cooperation or different goals to achieve, how to fix it. From Miskolc, from northern Hungary, from Hungary, the German influence is really important, especially in economic field, economically, and the German companies, the German politicians, and please don't forget the cultural actors and bodies influence the everyday life and the everyday and the work life here in Hungary. So Germany is as the main player, and maybe this is a problem, that there is no counterpart, there is no counter partner in the current European Union, but Germany as the main player in the integration is influencing really the Visegrad countries and the community. And this is really good that there is a dialogue, there is a cooperation between the Visegrad countries and Germany. There is an institutionalized frame of cooperation, and this is another really positive achievement and outcome of the integration. This is for my contribution.
Thank you so much, Daniel. What about you, Mr. Inotai?
Thank you very much. Let me come back to Professor Bogdan Góralczyk, my old friend, to his original remarks. I fully agree with him, and I wouldn't like to repeat the global framework he had been so excellently describing. Just at the beginning, going back to 2004, we all, in the all the Visegrad countries, including also the other 6 countries which joined together with us, we fully committed to the European Union's basic values. Otherwise, we could not have become members. There were very clear accession criteria. The question is, of course, was it a belief or misbelief of the Western Europeans that once you are committed to the basic values, democracy, European values, etc., then you will never violate them, because there is no measure in the hands of the European Union that if you violate the basic values, then you can be kicked out. You cannot be. Once, if you are in, you can do whatever you want. And this is a big mistake in the whole construction of the European integration. That's the first remark. The second remark is that all the previous enlargements, if you look back from the United Kingdom through Spain, Portugal, Austria, each widening of the European Union was accompanied or preceded by a parallel deepening. The trade policy, when the British joined, the euro when Austria, then the regional policy and the foreign policy towards the Mediterranean when Spain and Portugal joined. The Eurozone was created already when Austria and Sweden and Finland joined. We have had the largest widening in 2004 without any deepening. Bogdan has rightly mentioned there was a deepening process, but it was practically blocked by France and the Netherlands. And then as a result, we had the Lisbon Treaty, which gave back a lot of power to the nation states. Instead of strengthening the Commission, it had given back all the veto power to the nation states within the European Council, with which several countries, not only the Visegrad countries, which had been misused several times, this veto right, by the Visegrad countries and by some other countries. And that is under a number, among a number of other issues, has contributed to not to deepening, but to undermining the European integration. That's and who is undermining the EU and why? We can come back to it. 2 small remarks on Germany. Germany is definitely the most important partner, both politically and not necessarily in security issues, but certainly economically for all the Visegrad countries. 26 to 35% of our trade, Hungary 26, Slovakia 35, are with Germany. German companies play a very important role. A large part of our labor, which is working abroad in the European Union, is finding a good or bad job possibility in Germany. German capital is essential. German multinational companies are playing an outstanding role. But I have a bit heretical question here. Maybe Germans will not be very funny, very friendly with it. Multinational companies all around the world do have, according to international law and practice, corporate social responsibility, which means that a part of their profit, which is huge generally, is used for social, educational, health, or other purposes. Very right. My question is, to what extent, at least within the European Union, where we allegedly have common rules and common values, to what extent multinational companies from the EU, not least the German ones, should have also a corporate political responsibility when some countries are violating, where they are very strong, the German companies, and these countries are day by day violating the basic rules of the European Union. Why are they not protesting?
Because there is no political will which is pressing them to do that. They are just oriented to, they are business oriented, and here you need to have some kind of political will inside. Political decision is necessary. This is the problem.
Well, I do agree, they have economic purposes, but at the end of the day, if the political situation will be undermined in a given country and the European laws will be undermined, they will be the losers as well. So it is a very short-sighted view and very short-sighted position of these companies. But maybe they are short-sighted, and a lot of capital is short-sighted. Sorry.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
That's true. Okay, so maybe let's go later. And from the 1st of July 2020, Poland will take over the presidency of the Visegrad Group. What will be or are the main assumptions of the presidency for this and next year? Please, Mr. Bogdan Góralczyk.
I will be short here because as all we know, we have two troublemakers looking from the perspective of the European institutions to the integration. One is Hungary, which was sent by the European Parliament to the European Court of Justice for misbehavior and not representing the rule of law. And the same case is with Poland, which was sent by the European Commission to the European Court of Justice. So we are under the pressure, and we have constant tug of war between Brussels and our capital cities. On the other hand, there's more and more on the agenda, and talking about the Polish presidency, first of all, Poland is a very peculiar case, even within Visegrad Group, not only within the European Union. We still have some almost 90% of our energy mix or energy package is out of coal. So when the new Commission is coming out with the new blueprint, with the new strategy, so-called green strategy, and is ready to remove fossil fuels from our agenda until the mid of this century, Poland is a real problem. So definitely one issue which Poland is raising is definitely energy security, and this one will be raised again. Actually, in the last December, Poland was the only country which was voting again, and we are due to the COVID, we are not dealing with this, having so many other problems on the agenda. But I understand we need to find a special solutions for very peculiar Polish case in the field of energy. By the way, I do not believe that there will be a common energy policy within the European Union due to the fact that Germany, in aftermath of infamous Fukushima tragedy in Japan, the German Bundestag was voting that atomic energy should be out of Germany, while France has 87% of energy from the atomic energy. So completely different approach. And this is a real issue, what to do with the energy. Second one, which Poland is rising, is food security. This is another story. We are strong in coal, but fortunately, in this case, we are very strong in agricultural sector. Polish export is very competitive on the global scale. We had enormous success story in the most demanding markets, including Germany, Italy, France, or even United States of America. But phytosanitary requirements are necessary. And this was, of course, discussed even prior to the pandemic. Right now, as we know, this is even more important issue. And finally, the third issue, which is strongly raised by the Polish side, it's defense, common defense, or common security of the European Union, because we have many problems in transatlantic relationship. Donald Trump is raising frequently the question of fundraising, and that United States is paying for our security, which is partially true. So Poland is very eager to have some kind of more security. We are very sensitive due to our neighborhood, because we have, as an immediate neighbor, both Ukraine and Kaliningrad region. So we have Russia. And instability and unpredictability on the eastern side. And the problem is, which is discussed in Poland frequently, what to do first. Do we need a stronger NATO, stronger American participation, American boots on the ground here in Poland, which many would like to see. On the other hand, maybe some kind of independence in security system of the European Union, which is not represented here in Poland as a mainstream of thinking, but in some liberal circles, we would like to have a more independent, more secure, more independent player, also in the security dimension, the European Union. And final one, of course, which is sleeping now due to our lockdown, but we would, in other terms, we would like to have right now a great debate on the next financial requirements, next budget of the European Union, which is strictly linked to the first issue which I raised, which is Article 7 of the treaty, which is the procedures against us that we are not covering properly the rule of law. So we have a lot of things to talk about, but I think this food security, energy security, and security as such are the three issues which are the most important from the Polish perspective, and they were raised, and they will be raised again and again, whatever happens in our elections, in our situation here, and even after the COVID right now.
Okay, thank you for your comment. We already know that the political situation in the Visegrad country is very dynamic, let's say. And what is the economic situation like? So maybe please, Mr. Dániel Kuttor, introduce an overview on 16 years of regional economics in V4.
Thank you very much for the virtual floor. Anyway, this is my research topic, so just understand the economic passes and economic developments in the Visegrad countries. And I think this is a key point to see how these economies evolved during this 1.5 decade. Especially my professional attention is dedicated to the regional economic developments, especially the cities understand the cities and developments in the cities. If you remember, if we look back to 2004 when we joined the European Union, and if we try to recognize and just see the main goals of our access to the European Union, among the goals, the main was the convergence, so declared convergence on macro level. So achieve the living standards in the Visegrad countries compared to the European Union average, and somehow achieve the economic development level as the Western European ones. But no one set a goal for regions or for cities, although this is a key and a crucial issue, how these territories, how these subnational territorial perform. Do our cities are competitive enough, performing good? What about the countryside? These regions, these territories are lagging behind or able to join the European Union, the integration in this field, I mean economically. What we can see at macro level, so macroeconomic level, we can see a pretty good performances. So if we are comparing different peripheries of the European Union, comparing the Mediterranean to the East Central European part, Scandinavia, or the Atlantic axis, the East Central European periphery, these countries perform really good. So now Czech Republic is really close. I mean, the GDP per capita figure is really close to the EU average. If you look at Slovenia and other advanced countries, they are really close to the European average. And in all countries of the Visegrad countries, we can observe some economic convergence. The most in Slovakia, which performs really good. And others like Poland and Hungary showed a relatively moderate economic convergence. But anyway, the balance is really positive. We have a surplus, and we could narrow the gap between Western standards and the East Central European ones. If we look at the regional level, if we're comparing regions like the counties in Hungary or regions in Hungary and the voivodeships in Poland, the picture is more diverse, and we can see other divergence, lagging performances, and some regions which have different, not so advanced and positive geopolitical position, more locked economic structure, they are more stagnating and lagging. And why it's so important to see and understand these economic differences, or I can call it territorial inequalities, because if we look the referenda in the last time, like the Brexit was already mentioned, we can see different Europes coexisting, different regions, different societies coexisting. And the levels of the integration and the globalization in territorial units are different and really diverse. And if we are not able to balancing these gaps, development gaps between or among these territorial units, it can result, it can finally cause the collapse of the European Union. Although I don't want to be so negative, because these territorial inequalities and differences are natural phenomena in space. But if these divergent gaps are getting higher and higher, and the differences concerning the living standards, the GDP per capita figures, and other social economic figures can be a real threat for the Visegrad countries, for all the Visegrad countries. And the worst news for us, that these days in the European Union, we pay less attention on the cohesion, we pay less attention on inclusion, we pay less attention on divergence or convergence. And this is a problem, because if this unbordered Europe is still existing, which is the case for the future, the territorial differences with the social differences are getting higher and higher, which can be a threat, a challenge for the future.
Thank you for your comment. Yeah, 2 years ago, Poland Statistics prepared, as I remember, an analysis that trans-border cooperation between Poland and Slovakia and Czechia is growing year by year. So maybe absolutely we have something to do with it in the next few years. Okay, so maybe Mr. András Inotai, can you say something about your appearance in 16 years balance of our membership?
Yeah, well, of course, we can have a completely different conference on what the four freedoms: trade, services, capital, and labor, free flow of labor meant for, both positive and negative for the Visegrad countries, but and particularly the EU money. I would like to make just a small comment. We have been the biggest net beneficiaries of EU money. Hungary is the most important net beneficiary in per capita terms. About, on the yearly average, 3% of the Hungarian GDP is coming from the EU money. In some countries, it is 5%. So even if nothing happens in Hungary, 5% EU money, let alone the remittances of Hungarians working abroad, it would create statistically 7% growth rate. Where is it? Where is the money? Why were we not able to make use of the historically unique opportunity of modernization, both economic, social, and mental, in the last 15 years or 20 years? It is an open question, a topic of another conference. The other is catching up. Yes, if you look at the statistics, at the beginning, 2004, Slovenia stand at 87% of the EU average, the Czech Republic 82, Hungary 64, and then Poland, Slovakia, Romania, Bulgaria, etc. Today, the Czech Republic could increase a bit, but it is still below the average. Slovenia remain more or less on the same level, but very near to the average. Slovakia is a very clear, a positive example, which is partly due to the introduction of the euro, that the national currency could not be depreciated, which was the case in Hungary. Yes, last year we had a proud 5% GDP growth, with 7% devaluation of the Hungarian forint, which means that we did not come nearer to the EU in euro terms, but we fell back, despite a very proud high 5% growth. Why that? Slovakia is, Poland is also progressing very much, Romania is progressing, and why is it not working? Had not been working in Hungary. The third remark and the last one is that really catching up is a double-edged process. Some parts, as for instance the metropolitan areas, everywhere, otherwise, not only in the Visegrad Group, are catching up. And then, on the other hand, there is a growing divide between the metropolitan and the rural areas. You can find it in Germany. You can find it in Britain. That is the result of Brexit. You can find it in any other country. It is a universal phenomenon that even in nation states, the metropolitan and the rural areas are diverging. And it is not only economic diversity, it is to a large extent mental diversity. And that is much more important. And here, there is a bomb within the European as well, which can be used or misused by intra or extra-European intervention.
Mm. Okay, thank you so much. Maybe let's go abroad and to the different Asian countries. So because the global player influencing not only Poland, Slovakia, Czechia, or Hungary, but also the entire European Union is undoubtedly China. So could V4 be a European platform for building relations with China?
I understand this belongs to me as someone who spent some time in China and with China all my lifetime. Well, I would say that even talking about Visegrad cooperation, we need to add some new actors, and situation has changed tremendously. Initially, even in Polish language, there's a traditional curse between Russia and Germany. Sometimes one side was invading us, sometimes the other, sometimes both of them at the same time. Famous or unfamous Ribbentrop-Molotov treaty or pact. So we had Russia and Germany, Hungary, maybe it was rather Austria or Turkey sometimes, but we have the same problems of Kuruts and Labans all the time in our history. How to cooperate and with whom, and how to be independent. And when the Cold War system collapsed, the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc disappeared, Russia and Germany remained, of course, as our neighbors, influential ones. But we had two new players which did come to us. One was the United States of America due to the enlargement of NATO. And it was a crucial player immediately because it was not only a global player as such, but we were on the outskirts of the NATO security system, because on the border lines with Poland, we have Ukraine, Belarus, and the Kaliningrad region, which is the regions and countries which in immediate future will be not the members of the NATO security system. So we had the third player, United States of America. And afterwards, what we are discussing today, we joined the European Union 16 years ago. And we have another one, European institutions and Europe as such, let's put it this way. And now something completely new, which has started already after the global crisis of 2008, 2009. China has emerged as a global player, and China has a strategy towards Europe, even a double strategy. One was inaugurated here in Warsaw in 2012 in April. This is so-called 16+1, recently changed into 17+1 umbrella. And simultaneously, separately, parallelly, there's a Belt and Road Initiative, which is two new Silk Roads, one on the land, the other one maritime, which are coming to Europe. So suddenly we discovered that we have a fifth player. After Russia, Germany, US, and the EU, we have also Chinese on our lands. In Hungary, which is my second homeland, I can openly declare, there are so many that sometimes I feel myself almost in China, and not necessarily only in Asia boats, Asian shops, which are everywhere. So it means that they are with us and they are not intending to go out, vice versa. To my mind, current Chinese leadership has a strategy, and they are afraid in Beijing that they will be returned to the Cold War. They do not like it. To have a bipolar world with the Americans. We see instead of cooperation and solidarity, something vice versa, something different is undergoing during the COVID. After the trade war, we have already propaganda and media war, very harsh, to such extent that here in Warsaw, we had several exchanges, open exchanges in Polish language between American ambassador, sitting American ambassador here in Warsaw, and the Chinese one. The Chinese wrote today, just today when we are discussing, a huge very important speech, how precious are the Poles and how ugly are the Americans. We have something completely different, and we need to observe it. And something which was a Polish traditional curse between Russia and Germany, for the Chinese, from their perspective, is probably the best geopolitical localization you can imagine. So Mr. Orban has Kaletinitas, the strategy of opening toward the east. Poland has no strategy whatsoever toward the east, but the Chinese have, and they are coming. And recently they are starting to invest. It's not only finalization of this famous flagship of 17+1, which means Belgrade, Budapest bullet train, the Chinese one, which is a part of the game only because the Chinese want to connect central Poland, town of Łódź, communication hub, with the port of Piraeus in Greece, which is the final stage of the maritime Silk Road. So they have some strategies, and we need to observe more and more, like Hungarians did a long time ago, the Balkans, because we have a new investment, especially in Montenegro, Macedonia, sometimes to half of their GDP is covered by the Chinese money. While here in Poland, I was observing recently and published an article study what China is doing in Belarus. It's an incredible story because they invested half of the GDP for the new investments. So we have a new partner, new challenger, new investment partner, and we need to adjust ourselves to these new circumstances, which will be not easy because we have constant pressure of Americans and growing tug of war between Americans and the Chinese. And hopefully there will be no this famous or unfamous decouple, which means the divorce between two major economies on the globe, because it will be a disaster for all of us. As a former ambassador to Southeast Asian countries, this is my final statement. There's a proverb: when elephants fight, the grassroots will be broken altogether. So all of us will be the victims of this kind of elephant fight. So we need to be careful. At the same time, we need to take into consideration that we have a new fifth player on the ground, and this is a completely new situation.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you so much. Maybe to get some conclusions of our discussion, let's try to answer the question: what unites us and what divides us after 16 years? And maybe let's start with Mr. András Inotai.
Well, we have partly a common, partly different history, which is very important. What unites us is that we are full members of the European Union, and we could make use of our membership in the Union if we are very realistic, not as some Hungarian politicians who said that the Visegrad Group will be the engine of growth in the European Union. We have 7% of the EU's GDP. The Benelux has 10%. I have never heard any Benelux politician to be proud of, we will be the engine of the European Union's growth. They are absolutely fine. They are very much cooperative. They have a lot of profitable business, but be realistic. That is first. Second, Of course, there are some dividing lines which have to be taken into account. One is geopolitical. The Czech Republic is the only country with just Schengen borders. All the others have external borders. Hungary has several non-Schengen borders, even Croatia is one. The second is Eurozone. Slovakia is member of the Eurozone. All the other countries, at least at the moment, are not. Then we have, not we, the leadership, the political leadership in Hungary has a very different view on Russia than Poland, which is partly historically understandable, but only partly. So at the same on China, the Hungarian government is very much in favor of China and is paying a lot of money, incredible lot of money, of taxpayers' money, on the, not only on the Budapest-Belgrade investment, but also on some others. And we have to take into account, there is a large Chinese community in Hungary, of course, and we have to add that a lot of Hungarian exports connected to German companies, car-making companies in Hungary, are definitely linked to the global value chain coming from China. So it is a German-Chinese connection through Hungary. Otherwise, without Chinese imports, we could not produce the cars for Germany or for the world. This is another issue. Concerning Eastern opening, Bogdan has mentioned, yes, the Eastern and the Southern opening of Hungary, which was a political slogan, was a complete mistake with a lot of money which was spent on it. Still today, 90% of the Hungarian exports to China consist of the exports of 3 or 4 multinational companies working in China. And in the case of Poland, as if I know it well, about 2/3 of the Polish export to China come from genuine Polish small and medium-sized companies. Where are the Hungarian companies? Why are they not present? So this is another issue. We have to be very realistic. There are a number of opportunities for cooperation, particularly in the current unstable global and European situation, where we can produce a value added to Europe's future, provided we are real and convinced Europeans, because our future is in Europe and not in a traditional 19th century nation state. If the nation states, Europe will become disruptive and nation states will again dominate the scene, the Visegrad countries will be the first among the victims.
Summarizing, I would say something and taking into the consideration COVID-19 and the pandemic period. As we can read in Mrs. András Inotai working paper from May 1990, although the future development of European trade is uncertain, long-term effects of the pandemic stemming from the reorganization of global value chains can favor the Visegrad region. So maybe politicians and entrepreneurs should now be very vigilant. Okay, so thank you very much for the conversation, and our listeners and viewers are invited to follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and I highly recommend visiting our website www.visegrad-koetus.pl. Thank you.
Thank you very much.